And welcome back, fellow football fanatics. This is College Football with Sam coming at you with another weekly college football roundtable. This time it's for week 5, and we're mostly going to focus on Oregon and Penn State and what I think is the game of the week, game of the year. I figured that it would be a good idea to bring on an Oregon Ducks expert. So this is where Big Ten Ted comes into play. Thank you for coming on and joining us.
Yep.
And John, he's been on here before with us, runs the Big Ten Huddle on YouTube, does really good work. We're just going to be talking about mainly the Nittany Lions and the Ducks, but also some other Big Ten games. Ohio State, Washington is a big game. We can touch on USC, Illinois, and Indiana, Iowa towards the end of the show. Where I want to start off, and let me know in the live chat, audience, please let me know, be engaged. Who should be favored in this game and why? Because the public seems to be very much involved with Oregon here. Oregon has looked like the better team through the first 4 weeks. There's no denying that when looking at the efficiency metrics, when looking at the power ratings, and everything that really has to do with just this season, not really looking at priors. And yet, the books have Penn State favored by 3.5 points. So kick it off, Ted. Who do you think should be favored and why? And did the line surprise you?
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic, I think, to be able to talk about. I believe that, like, Oregon, it feels like what we've seen so far, neither team have taken on really any significant opponent. I'd probably say the best team either team has played is probably Northwestern, which, doesn't say a lot for the opponents that they've played. So it's really hard to judge, I think, at this point in time. But I think you got to go with the whiteout is such a home field advantage right now. It creates, like we saw it last year when Oregon on October 12th hosted Ohio State at Autzen, where you had the pre-snap penalties and how much of an advantage just the atmosphere. And I think that could be the same case. And that's, I think, certainly why things are maybe a point or two. I think it was at 3.5 last time I checked. So I don't necessarily have a problem with Penn State being favored. The more I dive into it, man, Oregon seems like the more talented team to me. They seem like a team with more speed. I think they've got the better quarterback in this game. There's just a lot about this Oregon team. The more I really dive into these matchups, I think they're the bit. Now, that doesn't mean I think they're going to win, right? Because there's so many other factors, of course, with the Beaver Stadium and the whiteout atmosphere right now that go into this thing. But it's I don't have a problem with Penn State being favored, but I'm not surprised. And I'd probably, if I'm setting the line, I'd probably put Penn State on top, maybe by like 1.5, maybe instead of the 3.5 or something like that. But yeah, I can certainly see why it's in that direction the way it is right now.
For sure, the home field advantage for Penn State has to be the biggest factor here, right? I mean, you look at last year, what happened with Oregon and Ohio State and how much that favored everything. And then, I mean, for the team and not just in the odds or anything, but just how much it favored them on the field and how big of an impact that was in the game. And then overall, you look at the cross-country trip as well. This is something that Big Ten fans and people are going to have to be thinking about a lot for years to come. Now, it seems like players and coaches are probably getting more used to it. You saw USC travel out to Purdue. Purdue, not the best opponent in the world, but they still able to handle that better. I mean, they lost to Maryland last year when they made that cross-country trip. So they beat Purdue this year. Step up. But we'll see what USC is like going to Illinois, and we'll see what Oregon is like going to Penn State, because this cross-country trip is really something that needs to be thought about a lot. And I think the odds makers probably got it right here. And then also into this, we also have to consider people are looking down on Penn State a little bit right now because they've just not looked as impressive on offense as you thought that they might, right? Nicholas Singleton not having the best year so far. Wouldn't say it's bad by any means, but people expected more. Drew Aller, similar thing, not necessarily bad, but things have looked better in the past, and so you're kind of thinking he's a big piece to actually make this happen. So we all have our opinions. We all see it. We all react, but Vegas, the lines, the odds, they don't typically react like that. Now, that Ohio State-Washington line, I'm sure we'll get into that. I don't know what's going on with that one. That one's wild.
It is wild, and that's a great point to bring up, because that is a game I really want to talk about, and we'll get into that one later. Oregon has to travel over 2,000 miles to Beaver Stadium. Now, they're one of those teams that I think if someone is going to be equipped to make that trek, I can't imagine being in class now with the NIL universe involved. You're having your own deals, you're marketing yourself. I sometimes think of myself as busy. I cannot imagine being a top tier athlete in an institution like Oregon, where you have to travel across the country for the majority of your away games just because of how things are situated. At the same time, I can't imagine the pressure that has to be on Penn State, because James Franklin hasn't beaten a team that has finished top 5 in Football Power Index since 2016. And the reason I used FPI is because technically 2016 Ohio State didn't even finish top 5 in the AP poll. They were a playoff team, but they lost 2 games for whatever reason, were ranked outside the top 5. It's been a long time since Penn State has really beaten anyone of championship substance. So this leads into what I think is a key question here. Who needs this game more? Maybe it's a cliche, but while Penn State is at home in the whiteout, they're hosting I would say already close to an elite, if not already an elite program in Oregon, mostly looking at the here and now, not the past 10 years or so. I can also see at the same time that Oregon, if they win here, it's as if they're saying, well, we're here to stay. And we're not just here to stay next year. We're a program that totally reloads, and we can go on the road and we can do what Ohio State does, which is go on the road every other year and beat Penn State. So I think from my perspective and most people's perspective, it's Penn State who has more to lose here, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on that. Who do you think has more to lose? Who do you think is under the most pressure here?
It's Penn State. Yeah, it's most certainly Penn State. I think going forward, it's like, you're coming off of a bye. It's a whiteout. There's high expectations because if you look at their roster, and a lot of people have said this, certainly not. I'm not the first person to say this. If it's not now, then when is it for James Franklin? When is it going to be? You're not going to have the 2 running backs. You're not going to have the quarterback. You're not going to have offensive. You go a list of all these guys. That's why people have kind of said, hey, it's like 23 Michigan, 24 Ohio State, kind of bringing everybody back for kind of one last run kind of thing. And this is the first big one. Penn State fans have been clamoring for years. It's like, we're sick of playing Washington and Minnesota and teams like this on a whiteout. Let's get a big game in here. And now you got a big time home field advantage. Like for Oregon, I mean, it's like specifically Dante Moore. It's like, there's no pressure on us. Let's just sit back and let her rip. Let her rip was the theme for the Ducks in that game against Oklahoma State. And boy, did they let it rip, putting up 69 on the Cowboys. So there's no pressure. I mean, it's a college football playoff era. You could probably lose either of these teams really, but specifically Oregon, you could lose 2 games. You could get into the playoff. Now, of course, they'd like to at least very least have a home game in the first round of the playoff. So, only losing 1 game would give them a better chance to be able to do that. But if Oregon goes out there and they fall, it really doesn't hurt them. But if Penn State goes out there and loses, it's another one in the loss column against a top 10 opponent for James Franklin. And, they still got Ohio State on their schedule. They still got Indiana on their schedule, which is in Happy Valley a little bit later on this season. So I think you're going to see Oregon come out and play loose, take some explosive shots early. And I'm very curious to see how Penn State really plays. If they kind of play a little bit uptight, if they're anxious, if you can kind of see the moment, and the pressure kind of get to them. Those are some factors back and forth that I'm really curious on. But no doubt, pressure is on James Franklin and the Nittany Lions.
Ted, I can't believe you would disrespect by not mentioning Iowa on the schedule as well for Penn State. Are they on the schedule? I don't know.
They are. I think it's in Kinnick, too.
Okay, in Kinnick. All right. Yeah, I was going to say, I think they have home against Indiana, Penn State, and Oregon. The Iowa fans on my channel are not too happy with me because I give them a hard time oftentimes. But overall, I totally agree with you, Ted. I think Penn State needs this one. The only counterpoint I'll give, instead of just repeating everything you said, the only counterpoint I'll give is that the loss last year to Ohio State for Oregon, I think still does loom large a little bit, right? It was in the Rose Bowl. It was a game where they made it look more respectable at the end by keeping it, to just 3 scores. But overall, I mean, that game was 34-0 at some point.
Yeah.
Now, people know me. I'm not an Ohio State homer. I don't bring that up all the time, but just for this scenario, I do think it's important to think through what happens if either team loses, like kind of what gets said about that team. What will be said about Dan Lanning and Oregon is if they get blown out or if they lose by multiple scores to Penn State, they're going to be said, okay, well, Dan loses it in the big games. Dan can't do it, which is not true, but there's tons of things fans say that aren't true. And then on top of that, Oregon, I mean, this schedule is looking more difficult now than it did at the beginning of the season. You do have Iowa, which, I give Iowa a hard time, but they're still a very respectable program. Kinnick is a difficult place to play. And then you have USC and Washington on that schedule as well. Good opportunities to get wins to help further elevate yourself, but Oregon, again, I don't think they need the win as much as Penn State, but there is stuff here on the table for Oregon as well that I think they need to be conscious of.
Absolutely. Those are some fantastic points. And I would agree that, Penn State is under the most pressure here. I think that Oregon, for example, can lose this game and they can still go on to win the national title. I think that if Penn State loses at home to an Oregon team that is younger than them and started the season being viewed as the worst team, if they win here, if Oregon wins here and you're Penn State, I have a hard time seeing you go on the road and beating Ohio State. And if you somehow do, that just means Oregon was that good and you'll have to play them again as they're more experienced, as some of that youth and greenness wears off. And you'll no longer get your massive home field advantage. You'll have to play them neutral field. So I think for Penn State, they lose, and I think one of their season goals is already kind of crossed off. And if you're Oregon, you lose here, and it stings, but your goals are still ahead of you. I think all of them are. An interesting topic that I've already heard discussed here with Ted saying that, for example, Oregon is faster. They have the better roster. I was just in a discussion on Twitter briefly before the show where the topic of Oregon's blue chip ratio came up, but a Penn State fan mentioned that they thought, for what I thought were some, pretty objective reasons, that Penn State has the better roster. I want to ask both of you who has the better roster here, and not just in terms of high school recruiting talent, but how they've played so far. What do you think about their development and how they've been coached? The depth, factor in everything that you can possibly do. And tell me, who do you think has the better depth and who has the better roster in this game?
Yeah, I still think it's Oregon. I think a lot of people coming into this season looked at a lot of the production that they lost last year. Oregon had a record 10 Ducks drafted in the NFL draft, and a lot of people said, how are they going to do it? How are they going to be in Big Ten championship conversation again? How are they going to accomplish all these goals? And people forget what happens in December, and they get back-to-back top 5 classes. And I just look so up and down. Like, the running back room is a fantastic example. I mean, they're rolling out 7 guys every game. I mean, they're rolling out everybody. They're rolling. And Noah Whittington, of course, has been hurt the last couple of weeks. He could have went last week. We saw him on the sideline with shoulder pads on, but obviously they wanted to have him ready to go for this game against Penn State. I mean, they're rolling out true freshmen. I mean, De'Aaron Hill and Jordan Davison are just playing at a much higher level than I expected them to. Jaden Lamar is a running back that's progressed, I think, a lot more than people in the Oregon base. When you got Mekhi Hughes as your running back 5, I mean, that should tell you about the depth, specifically in the running back room. I mean, he was going to be an all everything in the Big Ten this year, and it just hasn't panned out so far for him. I mean, I look at the secondary. The secondary, even though they lost everybody's gone. They brought in 1 veteran transfer, or 2 veteran transfers, I should say, in Dylan Thieneman and Jaden Kennedy. But there's a lot of young players in there, and they're better. They're just better young players. And this is the year for Oregon where it's like, hey, okay, a lot of fans were like, they saw a lot of the transfers come in and be like, okay, that's great, but we're recruiting these guys, signing these great classes in December. Let's see them on the field. And this season was kind of that opportunity. You're seeing so many great players at so many positions. Like, compared to last year, so many rooms within this Oregon roster are just better. They're more explosive. Quarterbacks better, tight ends better. I think as a whole, even though they had Connerly drafted in the first round, I think the offensive line is better. I think the defensive line, they had a first and a third round draft pick. It's deeper. It's certainly deeper than it was last year. You can go on and on and on. And, you kind of compare it to Penn State. I think the quarterback's better. I'll surrender the running backs. I think wide receivers better. Offensive line is probably, I'd probably say pretty comparable. Maybe I'd lean a little bit more towards Penn State. And then you can kind of go on defense. I just feel the depth everywhere for Oregon is just, and at the key positions, I just think they're a little bit faster. They're a little bit more explosive right now than Penn State. Penn State wants to play a certain way. They kind of want to be powerful. They want to be physical. That's just the way I kind of lean right now, certainly.
Yeah, I would agree that Oregon probably has the better roster, more talented, but, I always bring up the same thing that I'll bring up the thing I always bring up when it comes to most talented. The past 2 years since 2023, 2 teams have had the most talented roster all of those years, and neither one has won a playoff game, and that's Alabama and Georgia. So, talent is great, and it can do a lot for you, but in this new world of college football, I think we see more talent-equated matchups than we've ever seen before, and what gives you the edge in those talent-equated matchups? Experience and coaching, and these are 2 things that I think that Penn State has over Oregon right now. They have more coaches that have been together, and it's also something Texas had over Ohio State, with the coaching, but that was something that Ohio State was able to get over. So it doesn't always win out, but certainly in these type of scenarios, when you're at home, you have what I perceive as better coaching, and then you have a more, more chemistry, more experience with your guys. It's another thing that you have to consider in looking at these types of things. And so I think it's still a talent-equated matchup, but if I had to lean one way, I'd lean Oregon.
Oh, this is difficult. You both have made very compelling arguments here. I've said publicly on my channel that I think Penn State has the better roster, not from a blue chip standpoint, but I do think that Penn State is deeper along the lines of scrimmage. I think that Dante Moore so far has looked better than Aller, and there's a good chance he just is better. But I want to see how both of them perform in this game before I issue a referendum on that. And I love Penn State's defensive roster. I think a lot of that probably has to do more so with the coordinator and the assistant coaches, more so than just pure talent, because Oregon is a top 5 blue chip ratio, and they have gotten insane recruiting classes back to back. I mean, last year they had the number 1 overall class in terms of quality per player by a mile on 24 Sports. And it looks like they may get that this year, entering 2026, which is pretty phenomenal. And it's why I have a lot of respect for Oregon. It's actually part of the reason I ranked them a little higher than I would say the national average in the preseason, because I thought that they were too talented and had too good of a staff to not be a top 5, top 6 team. I mean, what Phil Steele had them outside the top 10, which I thought was pretty weird to start the year. But I would lean Penn State, I think, mostly because of experience, and I could easily be wrong. From my perspective, a good example is that at wide receiver, Oregon has the best receiver and most talented, I think, by a mile in Brycen Moore here, easily wide receiver 1. But I think that Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross, and Kyron Hudson would probably occupy the wide receiver 2 through 4 spot. And I think I see that in a lot of different instances between these 2 teams. But this game's going to tell us a lot. And that's what I'm excited about. This is the toughest test by a mile for each team. It'll be Oregon's probably toughest test for the entire regular season. So we'll learn a lot about these 2. Speaking of things that I think we already know, who has the best coordinator and who is that? And which team has the worst coordinator and who is that? Tell me why.
Oregon loves their coordinator discussions. Oh boy. Best coordinator. I think you got to be choosing between Jim Knowles and Will Stein.
Agreed.
I'll probably go with Jim just because of his experience by a little bit. Will's probably like the best offensive coordinator in the game. I mean, with all due respect, Andy Kotelnicki's pretty good as well. This is just my taste. This is just me. I think Andy gets a little bit gimmicky at sometimes. He's very creative, with some of the formations, some of the stuff he did last year and stuff. And I know this year they're fairly early on, and maybe we haven't seen as much of that this season. But that's just for my taste. I mean, they throw out 11 personnel, they go 12, and they can just do anything. They have players on the field. They can go from 12 to 21. It's just, they're so versatile. And Will Stein sets everything up. He shows just enough on film, but he also keeps kind of just enough in his bag for some of these games. It's just, Will's been great. There was kind of some complaints about the bubble screens and stuff towards the end of last year. When we're going, I think Tosh Lupoi is probably at the bottom. There's been a lot. Every time Oregon has a somewhat, let's say above average, even above average or average type of performance, everybody's, gets on the old, what are we doing with Tosh kind of point of view with that right now. So it can be a little bit hit or miss with him. I love their defense. I love the way it's structured. I love the players and the spots that they're in. And I think Tosh is a great recruiter. I think that's like the thing that he really is at the top of his game. He's brought in really good defensive talent. But yeah, I'd probably go the defensive coordinators as far as the best, and then I don't want to say the worst because I don't think Tosh Lupoi is a bad coordinator, but if one's at the top, one's at the bottom, that's probably where I'm going.
Yeah, I think, the conversation between Jim Knowles and Will Stein is probably the best one. Sam, you and I ranked the coordinators in the offseason. We both had Andy Kotelnicki as the top offensive coordinator, but I think, continuing to see him more and how he's utilizing the players that he has, I don't know if he's utilizing Drew Aller well enough right now without Bo Prabula there. It really feels like he needs some kind of wildcat package that he's used before, but don't actually make a wildcat because I hate those packages. Somebody like Trevor Pena or Luke Reynolds back there. Maybe Tyler Warren was so great to have because he was able to throw the ball. He was so big. He was such a mismatch for anybody in the hole that was going to try to go up against him. So I do wonder how that's going to work out this season. Overall, Will Stein seems to be better so far, so I'll give him the lean, but I got to go with the best being Jim Knowles in this one. We saw what he did last year in that Rose Bowl against Will Stein. I know Will Stein was out, no Evan Stewart, and definitely that kind of stuff needs to be talked about. It's not excuses, but it's stuff that needs to be talked about. But I think as of right now, he's the one of these four that has a national championship, and that was the best unit on that team last year that won the national championship. We can get in all the rumors of this, that, and the other, whatever. At the end of the day, he held the position, and they won it all. And then I got to agree with Ted on Tosh Lupoi. I don't dislike Taj. I think he's a good coordinator for the most part, but I do think that a program like Oregon trying to go for a national championship, it's a sticky situation because you don't want to go with somebody else because maybe they're not as good, but at the same time, you see room for improvement. One example for me, I think Taj tries to stunt the defensive line too much a little bit at times. Even in that Northwestern game, there were times when you saw, I think it was Bear Alexander stunting to the outside, and Northwestern was just running it right up the gut, and you had two Northwestern guard and center just out in the open with the running back, and so that's where you saw some of the 8, 9, 10-yard gains that Northwestern had in that game. So I definitely think that Taj is probably the bottom of these four, but he's not a bad defensive coordinator, like you said, Ted.
I'm in total agreement with both of you in terms of the best, and we can just say the bottom and not the worst because I've been pretty critical of Lupoi myself. Again, I'm not an Oregon insider. Will never claim to be an insider everywhere. I'm just a guy with a mic who, From my observations, I think that in big games, that's probably where he struggles because when it comes to the smaller and medium-sized opponents, they typically do feast and do pretty well. It's not like you're seeing Iowa or even Washington last year just casually dice them up. And that's something that I think early for Michigan, for example, Wink Martindale really had issues with, is even these middle-of-the-road teams would get behind him at times. And with Oregon, I think that they're fundamentally sound and they recruit well and develop well on defense. There's just something that I'm not smart enough to identify what the issue is there. Speaking of the Jim Knowles and Tosh Lupoy for the best and the bottom for the coordinators, are we all in agreement here? Just a very quick answer that if Lupoy and Knowles were flipped teams, that we'd probably all be picking Oregon here.
Oof.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Probably. I mean, there's so many other things that go into it, but yeah, I'd certainly maybe start leaning in that direction.
Okay.
100%. I think Jim Knowles is the biggest advantage for Penn State in this game, personally.
Yeah. John, I had him, I think, as reason number 2 of my 15 reasons for Penn State as to why Penn State would win. Like number 2. I just think he's that good. It's just, it's an interesting question to ask because I think that there's definitely more debate. And I think you guys identified that there's definitely more debate around who has the better roster and who has the better offensive coordinator. But then defensive coordinator, it seems like everyone kind of, well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people have that consensus that it's Jim Knowles and he's the one who gives Penn State a chance, or he's the reason why Penn State's going to win. So let's play off of that a little bit. Who has the better defense? Just better can be pretty general, can be pretty subjective. Just tell me what you think. Who is the better defense here and why?
I'll let JR go on this one. I want to kind of play off of him a little bit. I got some stuff to think about.
Yeah. Well, as much as I do think Oregon is very, very talented on defense, I still have some concerns with the youth of their secondary. It's been one of my biggest concerns all season. Bear Alexander has not been the most impressive, player in the world to me this season. Not saying he's bad. Obviously, all of these teams, both these teams have very good players. But if we're looking for kind of weak links, I think that he's probably one of the weaker ones on that defensive line. And so I have to go with those as kind of my critiques. And then on the Penn State side, Penn State hasn't really faced an offense to write home about at all. I mean, at least Northwestern has a running game that you could kind of compare. So it's hard to say for sure, but going off of what I know in the preseason and seeing, I mean, Amari Campbell has been really good for this defense so far. You're seeing Denai Dennis Sutton do a good job of getting to the quarterback. I know he's kind of been a little ouchy lately, but and then the secondary for Penn State, AJ Harris, Zakai Weekly. These guys, I think you have to go with Penn State having the better defense in this one. Oregon, maybe more raw talent with some of these guys in the back end. So maybe you can make that argument, but I think overall, coordinator, experience, the guys being there together. I was concerned about Zariah Fisher there on the defensive line, but he's been better than I anticipated. Chaz Coleman, holy cow, him coming in, he's been fantastic as well. And I'm not trying to say Oregon doesn't have fantastic guys. These are just pieces of the Penn State defense that I was a little unsure about, but they've came in and played really well, and so I'm going to go with Penn State.
I'd probably lean Penn State as well. I think, like JR pointed out the youth. I think give me the game's this week. Give me 2 years from now, and there might be more NFL guys drafted, being higher drafted maybe on this Oregon roster. Like the defensive potential on this over what they've been recruiting is just off the charts, specifically in the secondary. There is just a stupid amount of talent that they have. But you're starting a redshirt freshman corner in Ifeoma Degwu. You're starting a true freshman in Brandon Finney. They've been awesome. They've been locking down their side of the field. They've been really good so far this season, but they're still pretty young. And JR kind of mentioned the secondary, the experienced secondary that Penn State has. When we talk about youth versus secondary, I mean that experience that they have on the defensive side of the ball as well. He talked about Amari Campbell. There's a lot of Tony Rojas and Dom DeLuca as well in that linebacking group. From a defensive tackle standpoint, I think Amari Washington is the best defensive tackle on the field. I didn't say defensive end. Denai Dennis Sutton certainly pretty good, and Chance Coleman, but from a defensive tackle, I mean 6'4", 336. His vertical jump is like 36 inches. He is just an absolute freak of nature in the middle there, and he's fantastic at shedding blocks as well. So, the thing about Oregon's pass rush this year is we really haven't seen them unleashed. a lot of teams are, there's been a lot of teams running the football, a lot of quick game because they know what kind of rusher Mateo Uiagalelei is. They know what Tatum Tuioti is coming off of the edge as well. So I think they've kind of combated that a little bit. But, yeah, I think the experience gives Penn State an edge right now. But, yeah, this Oregon defense is certainly ultra talented. One other guy I'll kind of quick shout out, Jerry Mixon has been awesome at linebacker. Everybody was kind of expecting Bryce Betcher, of course, to be the starter, there, and he has been. And then Devin Jackson to be the other linebacker next to him that played in a handful of games last year after the loss of Jeff Bassa in the middle. But Jackson banged up during the spring, through the fall, and he just hasn't looked like the same player. But Jerry has come in. He's been in this program for 3 years. He was a 3-star coming out of high school, and he has been fantastic. A couple of interceptions, really maybe more in the pass game than the run game. He's a threat right now. But, yeah, give me Penn State's defense right now this week, I'd say, over Oregon's. But Oregon, there's certainly no slouch on the defensive side of the ball.
I got to point out just one thing really fast, Sam. Ted's ability to say all those names. I've just learned Uiagalelei, okay? The other ones and everything, Ted, Magnifico, awesome there.
Practice makes perfect. If you cover a West Coast team, you gotta ace the Polynesian names. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Just pure perfection. I always mess up on most names, even some ones that feel obvious in hindsight to be able to pronounce. So like Ife Obadegwu, which I think is an awesome name. It in hindsight feels like a name that is pronounced exactly as it's spelled, and yet I messed that up initially. Is anyone gonna debate, or does anyone think that Penn State has the better offense here, or are we all in agreement that at least for now it's Oregon? Just quick yes or no.
It's Oregon. It's Oregon.
Okay.
Oregon. All right then. Does anyone want to try mess myself up there? Does anyone want to try to debate why Penn State could have the better offense, or no?
Oh boy, that would be that'd be tough. You break it down. I think Dante's the better quarterback. I think he's a more talented quarterback. We've kind of seen Drew over the years. He's been USC game last year was good. Even the Big Ten championship game against the Ducks last year was good. But overall, you kind of get him into these bigger games, and just Notre Dame last year, it's kind of like you just kind of get the feeling where it's like, yeah, it's not bad by any means, but it's not like where a quarterback should kind of lift the other parts of the team up. I look at Dante. I've said this on my show a few times here in the past week or so. He's the high tide that raises all the boats. That is Oregon's offense. I kind of, maybe a little bit irresponsibly compared him to Aaron Rodgers at the NFL level. When he played with the Packers, he lifted everybody up, made everybody better. When Greg Jennings goes to the Vikings, his career goes down. When maybe other receivers kind of leave, they have a little bit of a downturn. Dante kind of has that effect, it seems, right now on this offense. I could give Penn State running backs. I could probably give Penn State offensive line, but if you're talking quarterback, if you're talking pass catchers, and just the way this offense kind of works together and how everything just looks easier, it just looks smoother. I watch Penn State sometimes. I'm like, that play, like especially a passing play, it looked difficult. These wide receivers, last year they couldn't separate. This year, maybe they're a little bit better, but overall the passing game is just it just looks kind of difficult sometimes. Whereas Oregon, everything seems so smooth. Those back shoulder throws this last week were just ridiculous. That long out route to Malik Benson in the Northwestern game, just the throws that Dante's making are just out of this world right now. So yeah, it would be a tough argument to make. But I think more the physicality, maybe of Penn State's offense, maybe you could make an argument, but certainly explosiveness in the entire package, I think favors Oregon.
To me, it hinges all on the quarterback, right? At the end of the day, Drew Aller should be the better quarterback between these two, but he's not played like it so far. Drew Aller has shown that he has an incredible arm, that he is tough to bring down. I mean, just watch the play last year in that game against Oregon in the Big Ten championship when he literally had a defensive lineman hanging off of him, and he still makes the throw over the middle, splitting two defenders. I mean, I'm surprised Penn State fans are not posting that video every day of the week. Like, I'm posting that every single day. Like, guys, this is Drew Aller. Don't stop believing in Drew Aller. This is still him. But I get it. He's just he does not seem to have the confidence. I was watching Langdon Tangwell, his show the other day, and he said that what he thinks needs to happen is one of the offensive linemen just needs to like go scream in Drew Aller's face and like tell him he's better than he actually thinks he is or something. And I fully support that, because it just seems like for whatever reason Drew Aller's kind of struggled with confidence throughout his career. He's kind of telegraphed throws before the snap, and maybe it's because of the wide receivers, but he has better wide receivers now, so I don't necessarily get it. If Drew Aller was a better quarterback so far this season, I'd say Penn State has the better offense, because I think the wide receivers are more experienced. I think the run game would probably be better. Offensive line, give or take the two, in my opinion, than you give tight end to Oregon. So it really just hinges all on Drew Aller. And with Drew Aller, he's not looked bad, but not looking great so far this season. It has to be Oregon.
Yeah, it's an argument that I think is very tough to make right now. With 4 weeks having passed, and I know neither team has played anyone, but that could actually make the argument stronger. Penn State has had a very, very tough time moving the football down the field in the pass game. The run game also started off pretty rusty, but now it's operating at a level of efficiency that I love and that the analytics love. The passing game is just rusty, I think is the best way to put it. It's interesting to me because on one hand, every time they do a 2-minute drill, I think, okay, holy cow, yeah, this offense is better. But then every time they're not doing a 2-minute drill and they're just trying to, get down the field with normal tempo, it just a missed pass here, maybe an interception, a dropped ball, or sometimes Aller seems to take too long to see the field and takes a sack. It's interesting. I think if there is a collection of points to say that Penn State has the better offense, it would have to be predicated on Penn State probably hiding some wrinkles, and also Aller performing really well on Saturday and in the following Big Ten games. Right now, I think Oregon does have the better offense just solely from an evidence-based standpoint. But I will say I think that Penn State has the better rushing offense. I mean, we've all given them backs. We've at least said there's a strong argument for them to have the better offensive line. And Aller's only had one designed run through 3 games. I think that's going to change. So Oregon, in terms of efficiency, in terms of what I've seen on the field, absolutely has the better offense. I am curious, though, about Saturday. And I am surprised that whether it's myself or both of you, that we're having such a hard time presenting the argument about Penn State's offense, because preseason, it was expected to take a step forward. And in theory, it has. After all, both teams have only played bad competition. We've seen teams load manage and sleepwalk through bad competition before. Georgia, Ohio State, though they look a little different because their skill players are that good. Michigan. So I'm curious to see what happens on Saturday if Penn State's offense does still look that rusty and Oregon's is clearly better, or if Penn State has a little bit of a spark to it. Few final thoughts before we give our predictions here. Biggest strength and biggest weakness for each team, and who has the better special teams unit. And then after that, we'll get to our predictions.
Yeah, I'd probably say I'll kind of start with Oregon because that's where my knowledge lies. Biggest strength right now is, it's got to be Dante. Dante is just, like I said, he's the high tide that raises all the boats for Oregon right now. And then just their plethora of weapons. It's so hard to pick a strength because, you got Kenyon Sadiq is as big of a strength as you're going to get at tight end. And Brycen Moore, I think, is poised for a big game type of performance as a true freshman. There's so many strengths, but right now I think you got to go with Dante. He's kind of the engine that's making this car and this Lamborghini kind of run as a whole right now. Weakness is a little bit of a tough one. There's a couple I think that you could throw out for Oregon. I don't. A weakness is kind of a weird way to put it, but there's been some inconsistencies in pass protection from their transfers from Isaiah World and Alex Harkey. Oh, wait a minute, Ted. They only allowed 1 sack. Yeah, I understand that. You kind of look at the film a little bit more. There's some people that I respect and trust, former offensive linemen at both of these schools, that talk about the anchor when it comes to Isaiah World at 6'8", kind of a little bit more difficult to get down, and thus those power rushers kind of get into his chest a little bit, and then. Harkey on the other side, maybe with a little bit of lean. He's probably more of a guard at the next level, to be brutally honest with you. So that could be talked about as well. It's hard to pick a weakness. Honestly, for this team. I'd probably maybe say like the tackles, which is weird. They've only, like I said, they've only allowed 1 sack, or maybe parts of the defense at times. Defensive linemen have had a little trouble shedding blocks up front. Once again, 90 to 95% of the time, it's been great for Oregon against lesser competition. For Penn State, the strength has got to be their run game. It's got to be their physicality, certainly up front. I mean, they've got the best running back tandem in the country right now back there, and they got four returning starters, I think, from last year on the O-line. It's going to be really difficult to stop, and we talked about Aller and maybe the uncertainties with him right now. It's just so it's certainly not going to be the passing offense. A weakness for Penn State has got to be the perimeter play on offense, the wide receivers. It's just, they've been, like I said, I think they've been a little bit better so far, but we haven't really, we need to see it against a little bit better competition. But that's just the downfield passing game. I had it pulled up before I was doing recording something. I think Aller's only thrown 20 or more yards down the field like 9% of the time. Now, competition, they just want to run the ball, make their Walmart run, get in and get out kind of a thing. But, we haven't really seen that. And it kind of goes into what we've seen from Penn State in the past. It's not a great downfield passing game. So that's probably where I would go with my strength and weakness for both the Ducks and the Nittany Lions. And special teams, Oregon, you had James Ferguson Reynolds, the punter. He's been pretty good this season. We just haven't seen a lot of the kick game for Oregon this year. The return game hasn't really sparked anything. I think it's pretty close to a draw. I guess maybe I'll side with the Ducks as far as special teams go.
Yeah, this is really interesting to think about. So I think I'll start with Penn State. And when I think of Penn State, the strength, and I'm going to kind of go with like the strengths in the matchup and stuff rather than kind of overall, because I think those are really, really hard to pick out and they don't quite equate as much to the game. So between the matchup, I think the biggest strength for Penn State is going to be the defense, right? The experience that they bring. I know it's year one under Jim Knowles, and a lot of people like to talk about fully install the defense and everything like that. I personally believe Jim Knowles was saying that to get Ohio State fans off his back for a couple years, so that way the defense wasn't completely ready yet. They wouldn't freak out too much. But overall, I think this defense is going to be prepared. I think they're going to be ready. I think there's not really a weakness on this defense. Maybe you look at Zane Durant in this one just because he's a little undersized as a possible weakness. But if you're calling Zane Durant a weakness, that's bad. That's a really good defense you got there. And then the weakness, I would say overall for Penn State, guys, I hate to say it, I've kind of harped on it, but it's been Drew Aller. Drew Aller is the weakness right now. When you look at expectations of what he was supposed to be and what he, kind of needed to be for this team and what he's been so far. I don't know about you guys, but one of the stats that I look at the most for quarterbacks is ESPN QBR. It has been proven time and time again that this is one of the best stats for that. You know who has a higher ESPN QBR than Drew Aller right now? Mark Gronowski at Iowa. And he's not been very good either. So for Drew Aller, I believe in him. I know he has the talent, but he just has not played like it so far. Maybe he comes out and does amazing. Maybe he comes out and does something awesome in this game that he hasn't shown yet this season. He's been holding it back. But the way he's been talking in the interviews and stuff, I have real concerns about his confidence and everything else right now. So for Oregon, I'll say that the biggest strength for them is the running game. I think it's really, really beneficial how many running backs they have that can tote the rock in the run blocking of the Oregon offensive line as well. I agree with you, Ted. There are some concerns about the offensive line pass blocking that could be talked about there. But man, the interior of this Oregon offensive line, they smash like crazy.
Yep.
I mean, they smashed like Michigan smashed 2 or 3 years ago when they were on the path to the national championship. And then you got 3, 4, 5. I mean, it's literally, if Noah Whittington is back, it's 5 deep running backs that you can go to. And we saw how beneficial that was for Ohio State to have fresh legs and fresh bodies. It's only 5 weeks into the season, but still fresh legs, fresh bodies to be able to go out and attack. I think that's going to be a huge strength for Oregon in this matchup. And then like you, Ted, I kind of got a hard time thinking about the weakness and stuff. And they've not been a weakness so far, but since they don't have Evan Stewart, we saw they didn't have Evan Stewart against Ohio State. I know I'm bringing up that Ohio State game a lot, but it's in my mind a lot this week as they're going against Penn State. Since they didn't have Evan Stewart, they had a harder time on the outside getting open. Gary Bryant, McClellan, obviously DeCorian Moore, these guys have been really, really good this season, and they've done a fantastic job blocking as well. I think that's been one of the huge pieces of this wide receiver core. So I'm not going to say they're a weakness, but I am going to say they're something that I'm going to be watching a little bit more in this one with some of the younger guys. Nobody, to my knowledge, doesn't really seem like Dante Moore has found like a number one all the time. But then on the other side of it, you have Kenyon Sadiq. So how much can you really say about the receivers? So that's where I'd go. And then if I'm going to go with special teams, I guess I'll go with Penn State. I think they've been a little bit better in the return game. Devontae Ross and King Mack have done a good job returning some kicks and some punts this season. And then, like you said, Ted, we've not really seen the kicking all that much. So, I'll go with Penn State, I guess, to have a different opinion there.
All right. Yeah. Thank you guys for providing that. And before we get out of here, would have loved to talk about Ohio State, Washington, Indiana, Iowa, but this is the game of the week. It's the most important game to talk about. What are you guys' predictions for this? I'll save mine for last. Whichever one of you wants to go first. Free for all.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I said how I feel like Oregon. I feel like it's a more talented roster, but this it's got this vibe to me, and I have no, sometimes you just got to go with your gut. You go with that gut feeling kind of thing. It feels like, remember, like when Oregon beat Ohio State last season, the home field advantage was a big factor in that shifting over there. It was a lot of people that were at that game say it was the best environment that Austin Stadium has ever seen. And that, we saw, like I said, we saw some of those pre-snap penalties and stuff that Ohio State had. And of course the Ducks kind of came out on top on that one. And, you got Penn State being at home in a big environment where people are saying, hey, this could be the biggest, baddest whiteout we've ever seen. And then when you flip back to later in the season, Ohio State, does what they do in the Rose Bowl. And I'm like, I got a feeling like this is going to be my prediction. I think Penn State's going to find a way to get it done. I think the crowd is going to have a huge factor. It's the first time there's a lot of youth on this Oregon team. They haven't really faced anything remotely close to this right now. I think Penn State has a decent amount, enough success running the ball to be able to do some things. I think Penn State's edges can probably win battles consistently more against Oregon's offensive tackles. So then if your protection isn't quite there as much and Dante doesn't have as much time to throw, then things get a little bit off schedule in terms of that. So I tend to lean Penn State, but it's just got the vibe to me where maybe Oregon falls in the regular season, but if they meet up again in the postseason, when this young group has 11 games under their belt, 12 games under their belt, 13, whatever games under their belt, maybe they get it done at that point in time. But yeah, I'll go like 30-28, something close, not as high scoring as last year in favor of the Nittany Lions.
Oh boy. Well, let me just start off by saying I have been burned twice so far this season. I was burned by Clemson, who was returning a lot of players. And Clemson, I dislike you more than I ever did before because I went out on a limb and said you were a top 5 team in the country. And now you look like crap. So thanks for that, Dabo. I went out on a whim and said that I thought Illinois would beat Indiana.
Oof.
I think we know how that turned out. I cannot continue to go with teams that I had high expectations for in the preseason, and I thought if you can just get this area right, if Clemson could just get the run game right, they could be a different team. If Illinois could just get the offensive line right, they could be another team. If Penn State can just get Drew Aller right, they could be another team. But I'm done picking just get it right. I'm going with what I've seen so far this season. I'm going with the team that, yes, they're going into the wideout. Penn State hasn't lost a wideout game since 2020, but now is the time. It's going to happen. Dan Lanning's a menace when it comes to these regular season games. He's eventually going to show it in the postseason. It's not if, it's when it's going to happen. It might happen this year for all we know, but I'm going to go with Oregon. I trust this defense in most of the areas, got a little bit of the secondary, but if Drew Haller's not himself, then I'm not as concerned about it. I trust Mateo Uyunglele. Oh my gosh, I think he's been fantastic this season. I don't think he's had the numbers to show it as much, but I think he's been fantastic. You watch the games, he's getting around pretty much every single tackle that's in front of him. Like you said, Mixon, Bocher, the linebackers for Oregon, that's an underrated part of defense that is so important, and they've been fantastic this season. So give me the Ducks. Dante Moore, Heisman campaign. He's going to be the Heisman frontrunner after this game, I think. Oh, and score prediction. Sorry, 30-27, Oregon.
Oh, you're good. You don't have to provide a score prediction.
I got one. I might as well say it, Sam. I might as well say it. Yeah.
Yeah. I got burned by Clemson too. I had Clemson ranked 4th. They're already 1-3. I don't get how that happens, but
when it's week 5 and the team almost has as many losses as you had them ranked in the country, you know it's not good.
Yeah, and even FPI thinks they're going to finish 5-7 at this point. It's bad.
Nice.
It's so bad. I was very confident in Penn State in the preseason, like beyond confident. Then as we played the games and I got to see Oregon on tape versus Penn State on tape, I was a little bit shakier and thinking, oh, wow, Oregon starting fast. I thought they would be really good at the end of the year, but I did not think they'd start this fast. They have. And Penn State kind of looks like they don't care or that they are lifeless. If you're a Penn State fan, you better hope it's the former, because if they're lifeless, they're not winning this game. Case in point, as this week has gone by and I've done some research, just rereading these teams and their depth charts and looking at the coaches and also what the sports books think and what the public thinks, I pretty much I'm not as confident in Penn State as I was preseason, where I thought that Penn State was going to dominate this game. I'm not there, but I'm pretty confident they're going to win. And the thing that I go back to is the matchup between these two teams last year, where Penn State ran the ball at will. Neither team could get pressure on the opposing quarterback. And because of that, Dylan Gabriel and Stein and Johnson were able to carve apart that Tom Allen defense like it was nothing. And when it came down to it, Oregon won because they could get into the end zone. They didn't miss a field goal, and they had the much better quarterback. And Penn State was playing catch up because of their turnovers. Aller hasn't been addressed. He hasn't proven that he's better than last year. In fact, QBR says he's worse. But I think Penn State improved at receiver, especially depth-wise, and they've gotten a better wide receiver one. They brought back their entire O-line, their running backs, and while they lost at tight end, I still think that's a good unit. And defensively, I think with Knowles there, even with Carter gone, I think the defense is much better. And I think it will be better coached, especially in big games. For Oregon, I think that they have improved at secondary drastically. They're talented, they're faster, they're taller, they're longer. I think that was in response intentionally to the Rose Bowl, and it worked out for them. But I think that they've dropped off, at least in terms of starting caliber at D tackle. I think that this offensive line, while probably better than last year's in some instances, is also worse in some instances. And receiver isn't probably going to be as deep for Oregon in this specific game as it was in last year's matchup. I think that between these teams, adding in the whiteout, Penn State has fixed some of their issues that Oregon specifically could exploit. And I don't think Oregon has done as good of a job fixing the issues that Penn State could exploit of them. So I think that Penn State here is going to win by probably, I'm going to say a touchdown to 10 points is what I'm kind of thinking here. I think they're going to win. I think they're going to cover the spread. And I think that probably by either before halftime or out of halftime, you'll see that at least as of right now, I believe they're the better team. But I could be wrong. Could be wrong. I know you guys have to go, but thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Would love to have you guys on again. Any final thoughts before we get on out of here?
Oh man, it's just, I'm ready for this one. We've a lot of people in Duck Country have had this one circled. It's kind of like, it's like, yeah, all these other teams and all these other games. It's like, it's a lot of people immediately after this last game against the Beavs, everybody's been like, all right, preseason's over. Time to buckle it up a little bit tighter. This is where we get to find out. Is it like, oh, Oregon's just been rolling over teams that have been lesser talented, or are they really that good? So we're about to find out a lot about kind of where, they really stack up in the grand scheme of things. And, you could kind of say the same for Penn State as well. I'm just so excited that we get this type of big game at night in a whiteout. Yeah, I know the Big Ten TV deals got their own thing and how they structure the schedule and all that. Penn State should, we should be able to circle the biggest game of the year that they get at Beaver Stadium and be like, let's get it in whiteout, NBC, Big Ten Saturday night. You get it every year, whatever. I'm just glad we get it this year. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Amen.
Gonna be a great game. I can't wait for it. I hope that it's a 4-quarter game, goes until the end. The game of the year last year in the regular season was by far Ohio State, Oregon. If Oregon can give us another classic, another one that we can look back on and say that was the game of the year, that was the most interesting one, that would be fantastic. Really looking forward to all the matchups and everything. And I'm fully ready to be wrong, because I was wrong about those two teams that I mentioned before. And then if they win by 10 points, I'm just gonna stop picking these teams that have really good returning talent, because I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, thank you guys once again for coming on, and everyone here live right now. Make sure to subscribe to Big Ten Ted on YouTube. Follow his Twitter page. Make sure to subscribe to the Big Ten Huddle and also subscribe to his Twitter page. Is there any other social media that I have to shout out for you guys before we end the show?
Just for mine on the Oregon side, if you're, I have some Oregon specific content, it's at Ted and the Ducks over on Twitter, and it's That Show Out West on YouTube and podcast platforms. So I keep myself busy during the fall. I do not have a moment to think of anything other than football now. And then I do some contributing over at Scoop Duck, part of the On3 network. So there's literally no free time. But I made time here today in this hour. So if you're more interested in the Duck content, that's how it is. Those are kind of the two things I'm doing these days. So go check that out.
All right. Go Ducks and go Nittany Lions, everyone. We'll see you all soon. And for the Roundtable next week at 8 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday.